Hello, friends. Tonight we return to the water, where memory drifts like silt, and stories sleep just below the surface. Let your breath slow. Let the world hush. And let the river carry you back to where a scholar once stepped beneath the current and vanished into legend. This is The Library Beneath the River, Part 2, Dreamwater Whispers. Maeve had not planned to step into the river, and yet her boots left the wood of Kellen's boat, her weight tipping forward into the glassy surface. The call she'd felt on the water had been impossible to ignore, a pulse that matched her own heartbeat, a pull that felt less like an invitation and more like something long overdue. The memory of the dream still clung to her, the towering shelves, the mirrored book, the way the river seemed to know her. She thought of the waterlogged volume drying by her hearth, and of the wordless promise it seemed to carry. One step, she had told herself, and I'll understand. But the river did not swallow her. It took her, gently, like a book being lifted from a shelf. Maeve's body passed through the surface without splash or sound, and the moment the water closed above her, everything else faded. The wind, the boat, the world. There was no cold, no weight, only the sensation of being unspooled, like thread unwinding into something deeper, something wider, something older. And then, stillness. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the library, but it was not exactly as she remembered. Gone was the dreamlike hush. Gone were the glowing shelves and drifting books. And in their place, dim corridors lined with blank stone, and a thick current pressing against her from every side. This time, she was not dry. Her hair floated like kelp around her face, and when she reached out to steady herself, her hand passed through silt and flickering light. She was deeper now, somewhere between waking and dreaming. Somewhere the water didn't just flow, it watched. She tried to speak, but no sound emerged. Instead, her thoughts echoed inward, as though spoken inside her mind. Where am I now? Why does this place feel different? Why do I feel remembered? The walls whispered back, barely audible, like water running over stone. She couldn't hear words exactly, but she could feel their rhythm, slow, patient, familiar. She drifted forward. Each step was more like a thought than a movement. The water obeyed her will, parting just enough to let her pass. Around her, the corridor curved gently, leading downward like a spiral shell. Pale light filtered through cracks in the ceiling, catching on motes of memory, bits of sound, color, and image suspended in the water like dust in a sunbeam. A child's laughter, the smell of ink, a leaf falling in slow motion, a name she hadn't heard in years. All of it passed by her in silence, like fish too shy to bite. And then, after what felt like both minutes and hours, Maeve reached a chamber shaped like a bell. Its walls curved upward in smooth, unbroken lines, tapering toward a high, domed ceiling, where threads of light spilled down like silver rain. Floor, if it could be called that, was a shallow basin of rippling water, its surface reflecting the room upside down so perfectly it was difficult to tell which way was truly up. Faint shelves grew out of the walls like ridges on a seashell, lined with books sealed in glass and pressed tight against the stone. Here, the current was slow and circular, endlessly looping as though unwilling to leave. The water was warmer in this chamber, she noticed, and carried the faint scent of old paper and river reeds. And at its center floated a figure, tall, robed, faceless. The fabric of its robes shifted like ink and water, slow and hypnotic, trailing wisps that dissolved into the current before reforming again. It shimmered slightly around the edges, as though the light couldn't decide where the figure truly began. Books orbited slowly around it, moving in perfect, soundless arcs. Their covers gleamed in muted tones, midnight blues, moss greens, deep rusts, each one sealed with a clasp or ribbon. None ever quite touched the figure, drifting close, but never close enough, never crossing an invisible boundary. Now and then, a book would tilt, pages fluttering open just far enough to release a single syllable into the water. Word too quiet to catch, vanishing into the silence before Maeve could grasp it. The figure's presence was not cold, but it was vast, like standing before the mouth of a cave and knowing there was no end to it. She knew this was the archivist, not because it introduced itself, but because the word settled into her mind like dust on a windowsill. Archivist. It turned toward her, not with its face, but with its intention. And when it spoke, the words appeared directly in her thoughts, soft and precise. You returned through choice. That matters. Maeve swallowed, though she didn't need to breathe. Where am I? She asked silently. The threshold. The archivist gestured, and a wall of shelves unfurled from the floor like petals. Each shelf held only one book. Each book pulsed faintly, some with warmth, some with sorrow, some with songs that hummed just below hearing. This is where memory waits to be read, the archivist said. But you are not here to read. You are here because something forgotten has awakened, a story that does not want to stay erased. Maeve looked around. What kind of story? The archivist drifted closer. Yours. Maeve felt herself pulled backward through memory, not physically but within. Images surfaced like bubbles from the deep, her mother's voice telling stories by candlelight, the old brass key she wore around her neck, long forgotten in a drawer, her first journal, buried in the garden because she was too shy to share it. Things she hadn't thought of in years. Things she didn't know she'd forgotten. The archivist reached out and handed her something. A book. Blank. On the cover, no title, no author. But embossed faintly in silver was a single symbol, a river winding into a spiral. Maeve ran her fingers along the edge. It pulsed once with warmth. "Why me?" she asked. The archivist's voice softened. "Because your story was misplaced, unwritten, and the river remembers what the world does not." Maeve looked down at the book. The pages inside had begun to fill with ink, slowly, line by line, as if catching up to her thoughts. "Others come," said the archivist, "some by accident, some by memory. Not all choose to remember." "Who?" But the archivist did not answer. It turned instead and gestured toward a narrow passage on the far side of the chamber. The current there was strange, shifting sideways, like a sideways tide. "This way leads deeper," it said, "toward the stacks, but beware of the books that bite back." Maeve blinked. "What does that mean?" But the archivist was already gone. Maeve drifted toward the passageway, the blank book tucked against her chest. The light changed as she moved forward, growing dimmer, cooler, shot through with long shadows that reached like ink dropped in milk. The walls began to whisper again, not with memory this time, but with possibility. She could have turned back. If she speaks her name aloud, the story ends. Don't forget the page with the feather. The corridor opened suddenly into a circular alcove, its walls made of mismatched stone blocks, as if the space had been patched together from fragments of other rooms. Shafts of pale light filtered in from unseen cracks above, catching on particles in the water and making them swirl like lazy snow. In the center, half tilted against the far wall, was a bench, if it could be called that, fashioned from gnarled driftwood and the splintered remains of book spines. Bits of faded lettering still clung to the wood, ghostly titles that dissolved if she tried to focus on them. And there, perched on the uneven seat as though it were the most natural place in the world, sat a person. Maeve paused. The figure looked up, startled, then squinted. "You're not from the index," he said. His voice was scratchy, like paper rubbed too many times by a pencil eraser. Maeve stared. "No." He stood slowly, stretching like someone who hadn't moved in years. He was tall, with a nose like a quill and wild hair full of tiny scraps of parchment. "My name is Jory," he said. You shouldn't be this deep alone. That usually means the library has plans for you. Maeve clutched her book a little tighter. You've been here long? Since I wrote something I didn't mean to, he muttered, and now the book won't let me leave. He pointed over his shoulder, and Maeve saw it, an enormous leather-bound volume chained to the wall, vibrating softly. It's rewriting me, Jory said, line by line. Maeve opened her mouth to speak, but a sudden tug at her mind made her stagger. The book in her arms was glowing now, soft light leaking from its pages, and inside, her reflection was staring back, smiling, but not her. Someone else, someone wearing her face. Jory frowned. That's not good. The walls shuddered, the water stilled, and then, from the shadows, a new voice curled around them like smoke. You remember too much. To be continued. Look for The Library Beneath the River, Part 3.